The 80s were almost over, and in the last 2 decades, all sorts of technology started to invade our homes. But the 80s brought a new kind of technology to the masses: video games. The industry started off slow during the 70s, but at the dawn of the 80s, dozens of companies saw in the video game business an opportunity for profit. This started a race to gain market share, and companies like Atari and Nintendo would rise to the challenge. Contrary to what many may think, Nintendo didn't rule the world of video gaming in the 80s. Outside of North America and Japan, the scenery was very much different. In all countries, Nintendo was very little to be seen, and other systems dominated the market. On the console side of things, the Sega Master System took over the market, especially in countries like Brazil, while in Europe the various microcomputers blistered any competition. So the scenery in North America and in the rest of the world was very much different. In 1983, the supposed video game crash happened due to market being overflooded with a large amount of systems. Again, this should be called the North American video game crash, because in Europe the video game industry was blooming. Nintendo and the NES were there, along with the Master System, the several Famiclone systems, the huge home microcomputers market like the Commodore, Acorn, Amstrad, and the ZX Spectrum, all this along with the growing IBM PC and compatibles market. The way I see it, the video game crash never happened in Europe. And this leads to the question, did the European market save the video game industry? Nevertheless, video game crash or not, this scenery meant that Nintendo owned 2 of the biggest video game economies in the world, the North American one and the Japanese. So what happened in the rest of the world didn't really matter to them. As an arcade powerhouse, Sega began developing games with complex visuals and sound, and the goal was to bring that arcade-like experience to the inside of our homes. So development of the Mark V began shortly after the launch of the Master System, which set the ground for the new system that would guarantee backwards compatibility. The project was handed to Masami Ishikawa, who already worked in the production of the Mark III and Mark IV consoles, the last one being the Master System. At first, the Mark V was set to be an 8-bit machine that would finally beat Nintendo and the NES with a Texas Instruments CPU at the core. But rumors of the new Nintendo system started to emerge. Nintendo was working on a substitute for the NES, and the leap in quality was inevitable. The initial project was immediately scratched, and Sega CEO Hayao Nakayama took upon his hands the decision of bringing the successful Sega System 16 arcade architecture to the table. The challenge was to shrink it down. He wanted arcade quality at home to finally defeat Nintendo. The design of the new hardware started to grow around the Motorola 68000 at the heart. The Motorola 68000 is a 32-bit microprocessor sitting on a 16-bit data bus running at 7.6 MHz. The new machine also had a second microprocessor, the Z80, which was present on the Master System, also granting backwards compatibility. In October 29 of 1988, the console was released in Japan, and so was born the Mega Drive.
첨단 16빗 슈퍼 게임보이 탄생. 게임의 세계가 달라졌다. 신나는 입체 광고, 생생한 입체 사운드. 슈퍼 게임보이. 삼성 슈퍼 게임보이.
Nakayama claims the name was chosen to demonstrate superiority over its rivals, with the Motorola and its speed being the main reason. It was for him a mega processor. The launch in Japan was accompanied by titles such as Space Harrier and Super Thunderblade, two Sega arcade games that were ported for the new console. The launch, although, was not easy but rather difficult. As mentioned before, Nintendo owned the market with its Famicom and had just released Super Mario Bros. 3 for the system.
新しい冒険が今始まろうとしている。愛よ、勇気を奮い立て。僕らはマリオと強くなる。テクニカルファンタジーゲーム「スーパーマリオブラザーズ3」。
On the other hand, NEC's PC Engine was already in the market for a whole year. Not only that, Sega had to deal with the fact that every major game development company were associated with Nintendo, with the last wanting exclusivity. This meant that Sega's library depended on arcade ports, and that kept the system going while not being able to surpass either Nintendo or NEC in its homeland. In North America, another Nintendo territory, where the Master System sold very poorly, the distribution of the Mega Drive was at stake, with Sega of America being grounded for the failure of the Master System and distribution being handled by Tonka. But a turn of events was to come. Michael Katz, former president of Atari's Entertainment Electronics division, had left the company and was nominated CEO of Sega of America to manage the launch of the system in the region. The contract that was signed with Tonka was quickly revoked and Sega of America took control. Katz's experience and knowledge of the North American market would come to be fundamental for a successful launch. In August of 1989, the Genesis was launched in North America.
We got a Genesis system by Sega. Why? Check it out. Arcade screen left, Genesis screen right. If they look the same, you've answered correctly. Besides, Genesis has real live action in sports games, flying games, and adventure games. A fantastic library, too. So if you want real arcade action, Sega Genesis has it. Or...
Dave, we got your golden axe.
Sega Genesis. We bring the arcade experience home. System and games sold separately.
Due to licensing problems, the system could not retain its original name. So Genesis, as for creation or beginning, was chosen. The launch of the Genesis was accompanied by titles such as Altered Beast, Last Battle, Space Harrier or Super Thunderblade, and Tommy Lasorda's Baseball. Sega of America then started an aggressive campaign to promote its new system, signing deals with celebrities such as Michael Jackson, Tommy Lasorda, and John Madden, and with companies like Disney.
Michael Jackson's Moonwalker video game, only on the Genesis system by Sega.
One of the most notorious partnerships was signed with Electronic Arts that catapulted both to the top of the industry. Electronic Arts saw on the Genesis a great opportunity to grow while not being very happy with Nintendo's restrictions during the NES time. This alliance led to EA becoming one of the world's largest video game publishers until today. The jumpstart that Sega had on Nintendo and the aggressive publicity of Sega of America resulted in the Genesis selling 1 million consoles during 1990. While Nintendo was preparing their great comeback with the Super NES, June of 1991 saw the birth of another setback for Nintendo. The Blue Blur was born. Sega was looking for a mascot for years, and the blue hedgehog, with an attitude that had 90s written all over, was just perfect. It became a pop culture icon, and Nintendo's Mario had finally met his biggest rival. Sonic made its first appearance in Sonic the Hedgehog, accompanied by other quality titles also.
Gotta go.
Hey guy, you're the first serious gamer I've seen all morning. Check this out, brand new 16-bit Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Wow!
What's this one?
Oh, this is Sonic the Hedgehog from Sega Genesis. Hey, look at these radical colors, huh?
Wow, Sonic's fast too.
No, over here.
I like Genesis, and it costs a lot less.
Wait, kid, that game
I'll
there.
take Sonic and Genesis.
I knew that.
Sonic the Hedgehog. More action, more speed. Sega Genesis. It's a whole lot more for less.
In that same year, Sega of America boosted their aggressive campaign even more, not only advertising that the Genesis was better, but trashing Nintendo's new system, and the slogan "Genesis does what Nintendo don't" was forever engraved in video game history. That same year, the Genesis outsold the Super NES 2-1.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis does.
16-bit sports action.
You can't do this on Nintendo. Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis
Does.
Genesis does.
Get Joe Montana free, Pat Riley free, Buster Douglas free, Super Monaco GP free, or Collins free.
Genesis does.
What Nintendo don't.
Sega was cool. The Genesis was the system for grown-ups. Genesis had blast processing. Nintendo completely disregarded what Sega was capable of, and the damage was forever done. The Genesis not only had beaten the established NES, but also the new Super NES. It was a 2-on-1 fight, and Sega had come out of it on top. Only in 1995 would the Super NES clearly outsell the Genesis, very near the life cycle of both systems when Sega started focusing on the next generation of consoles that would come to be the Sega Saturn. Nevertheless, the ending years of the system saw great titles like Sonic and Knuckles and Comic Zone, among others. Nintendo still claims until today that the Super NES outsold the Genesis, but the numbers are dubious, as Nintendo presents numbers for all continental America and not by region. In Europe, there was no Sega of Europe, so the launch of the Mega Drive had to be taken care locally, one country at a time, which delayed the launch of the console. The launch itself occurred in 1990, 1 year after the North American one and 2 years after Japan. Nintendo was not the dominant force in these regions, with the Master System already establishing some background for Sega and with various microcomputers being successful. This way, the competition was not so fierce. Still, Sega went all out advertising their new console, mainly by importing publicity from the North American market and translating it. The aggressive North American campaign invaded Europe like a storm.
Planet Earth, a scientist creates the ultimate machine.
At last!
A machine that will give him the power to journey into the Mega World. With thousands of colors, 16-bit graphic technology, and 10-channel Mega Stereo sound. The most advanced video game system in the universe.
Yes!
Their biggest competitor was the various microcomputers, which were seen as being superior and more functional than the 16-bit console. But computers were not for everyone. The easy plug-and-play of a console was a big selling point. Again, Sega went all out on publicity stunts, associating their brand new console with culture and sport icons such as the great Ayrton Senna.
To win, to be number one, and to have fun at the same time.
アイルトン・セナの感性がレーシングゲームをさらなる進化へと導く。
And the challenge.
アイルトン・セナスーパーモナコ GP2 メガドライブからレーシングゲームのナンバーワングリッドへ。
When the Super NES was launched in April of 1992, it was too late for Nintendo. The failure of the NES and the new imposing Mega Drive obliterated Nintendo's presence in the old continent, with the exception of Germany. Mega Drive outsold every other console throughout the years and started to threat the microcomputers market. At the end of 1994, the Mega Drive had sold 2.5 million consoles in the UK alone, over 1 million more than Nintendo's Super NES. The popularity of football, not soccer, but football, the one that you play with your feet and with a ball, therefore the name, along with EA's FIFA series, which still goes on today, was the perfect combination to help put the Mega Drive as the best-selling console in Europe and consolidate Electronic Arts' influence in video games. The Mega Drive came to be the most popular and important Sega console in Europe, dominating the market, leaving Nintendo nowhere to be found. Throughout the years, the system had its fair share of add-ons made for it, and revisions and versions. While some are more memorable, others are a little more forgettable. The first one was the Power Base Converter, also known as the Master System Adapter. Remember that the Mega Drive had a Z80, which was the main processor of the previous Sega console, the Master System. This meant that backwards compatibility was guaranteed. Playing Master System games on the Mega Drive was just a problem of form factor. The cartridges were different, and Sega quickly took care of that with a converter. Of course, the converter had some little electronics going on, because the pause button on the Master System was on the console itself. But for getting the games to work, this was a very simple job for Sega. The Mega Drive library was immediately expanded by hundreds of games. Yes, they were from the previous generation, but the Master System had lots of great titles, and for those who didn't have a chance to play them in the past, the Power Base Converter would open that possibility. While in development of the Mega Drive, an expansion port was designed and made it to the final product. This was proof that Sega intended from the very first beginning to extend the capabilities of the Mega Drive in the future. This was firstly thought to be for the Mega Drive floppy disk drive, much as Nintendo's Famicom disk system in the previous generation. But news of competitors working on CD-based systems, like the partnership between Nintendo and Sony that would not come to be, and NEC's add-on for their system, led Sega to go in that same direction. In 1991, Sega released what would be the first add-on to enhance the capabilities of the Mega Drive. The Mega CD was launched in Japan and in the next couple of years in North America and Europe.
Hey! You still don't have a Sega CD? What are you waiting for, Nintendo to make one? You have seen the games, right? Wrong answer, man. Show 'em! Want to see more?
As the name suggests, this was a CD-based add-on. The objective was to take the Mega Drive even further with new features such as scaling and sprite rotation that hit the wall of the Motorola 68000. The solution? The Mega CD had a second Motorola processor. The Mega CD was also limited by the Mega Drive's color palette, but allowed the system to output full stereo sound. The new add-on not only gave the Mega Drive the capability of using CDs, which was the next big thing as digital media was gaining ground, but also came with its own extra processor, extra memory, and audio enhancements. In 1993, Sega redesigned the Mega CD and launched the Model 2 as a more cost-reduced version. Instead of having a mechanical tray and going under the Mega Drive, the Model 2 had a top-loading lid and sat on the side of the console. Nevertheless, the system was well received in Sega's homeland of Japan, and the add-on provided the Mega Drive with a new boost in sales while having a somewhat respectable library of games at the end of its life. Lots of games relied on the hype of full-motion video of the 90s. Everybody was doing it. But it also had some games that would come to be some of the best in that generation, such as Sonic CD, for many the best Sonic title ever made, and Hideo Kojima's masterpiece, Snatcher. Regardless of the success of its system, Sega never stopped the development of numerous projects, and in 1994, Hayao Nakayama gave the order for the company to start working on the next generation of consoles, that being a new 32-bit system. And so was born Project Mars. Initial plans came to life with a meeting between Sega of Japan and Sega of America to build a brand new Mega Drive. But Sega of America was not on board with this idea. Joe Miller opposed to this though, and suggested that this new system should become an add-on for the existent Mega Drive. It was decided Mars would be another add-on for the Mega Drive, providing it with a new 32-bit processor, allowing for more advanced games to be produced while maintaining backwards compatibility. So while Sega of America was developing Project Mars, Sega of Japan was working on Project Saturn. Rumors started to emerge of a new Sega 32-bit CD-based system that would replace the Mega Drive. Project Mars was wounded. The new add-on for the Mega Drive was beginning to get overshadowed by the news from Japan. Nevertheless, these setbacks, Project Mars saw the light of day, and in November of 1994, the Sega 32X launched in North America.
Since the beginning of time, mankind has striven to double and redouble his powers.
A mysterious machine has appeared in homes across America.
All right, baby.
Increase the power of the unit 40 times.
32. X.
Welcome to the next lesson.
You spill your drink?
I don't have a drink.
Uh-oh.
The new add-on costed more than what was initially predicted, and very few systems were sold. Along with that, the library of games that were available was very little, and the news from the new Sega console and also the rumors of a new system in production by Sony led to, in early 1995, major retailers returning the majority of systems that would not get off the shelves. Only 1 month after the launch in North America, the rest of the world would get the 32X, and the reception was more or less the same in all regions. The 32X ended with a library of around 40 games worldwide and was doomed from the very beginning. The dispute between Sega of Japan and Sega of America, the late release during the Mega Drive life cycle, the shadow of the next generation of systems, the very little support from third-party publishers, and the lack of games led to the 32X being a forgettable moment in Sega's and Mega Drive history, and for many was the beginning of the end. During the Mega Drive life cycle, the system saw a number of revisions and versions. The first model, all black with slick lines and a face-punching 16-bit engraved right at the front that started the Bit Wars, saw in 1993 its first modification. The Model 2 of the Mega Drive, a smaller and lighter version of the console, was released worldwide. The Model 2 was more cost-effective for Sega, more power-efficient, and provided native stereo sound, although the quality of this last one was considered to be inferior. Sega also released the combo of the Mega Drive and Mega CD. This was a semi-portable system named CDX in North America and Multi-Mega in Europe. Only a small number of systems were produced due to Sega aiming it at the portable CD player market, leading to the system falling into the list of forgettable Sega products. Late in the 16-bit life cycle, Sega released a handheld version of the Mega Drive, or better, of the Genesis. This was a North America exclusive called the Sega Nomad, and it was simply a portable Genesis that you could play on the go while still being able to plug into the TV. This way, one may wonder where Nintendo got the idea for the Switch. Consoles are nothing without delivering quality video games. And while Sega continued to push their arcade experience not only by porting arcade hits to the new console, but also by producing brand new first-party titles like Ghouls and Ghosts, Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, Golden Axe, Revenge of Shinobi, the various Sonic games, and Streets of Rage, among others. The worldwide success of the Mega Drive led to a number of video game developers wanting to publish games for the new system. Developers like Acclaim, Accolade, Activision, Bullfrog, Capcom, Codemasters, Electronic Arts, who published more than 100 games on the system, Konami, Namco, Renovation Products, and Tengen, among many others, all wanted to be a part of the new growing Mega Drive. Mega Drive ended up having a library of more than 900 games by the end of its life, and games of all different types and quality, from platformers, adventure games, puzzles, sports, action, racing, shooters, beat-em-ups, RPGs, you name it. The Mega Drive had a wide variety of games for the player to choose. I would take the risk and state that it was the most versatile library from that era of gaming and provided the player with lots of different choices and experiences. The library of the Mega Drive was so good that until this day it's rare to find a video game system that doesn't have some kind of compilation of Mega Drive games. And games like Sonic recently made a comeback to its origins, while others, like Streets of Rage, are in the making. Let me quickly address my experience in my country, Portugal. As mentioned, Sega went for distributors locally. Each country was a different thing. In Portugal, Sega partnered with Echo Films, today Echo Play, that formed Sega Portugal. Echo Films was a company formed in 1985 and already had experience in distribution market of movies, and signing an exclusive deal with Sega for distribution of their products was the next step to take. On the other hand, Nintendo signed a distribution deal with Concentra, which also had some experience in the distribution market, but in this case, of toys. So the puzzle was no different in Portugal. Nintendo went with the toy company for children, while Sega went with the movie distribution company. Again, both companies aiming at different targets. Echo Films did such a great job from importing publicity from North America, from supporting magazines and journalism, supporting TV shows about video games, being at cultural and sporting events, while Nintendo was sitting in a corner, watching, just watching.
Mega Drive da Sega. Máquina infernal. Som estéreo. Cores incríveis. Microprocessador de 16 bits. Mega Drive da Sega. Agora também com 2 comandos e 4 espetaculares jogos, incluindo Sonic. Sega é mais forte que tu.
The Club Sega was created, and almost everyone that I knew was a member, where you would get some perks every now and then. Sega was a cultural phenomenon during the 90s in my country, and quoting Despi Sega, a Portuguese band, to sum things up, lots of Mega Drive from Sega. So the 4th generation of consoles was soon to be over, and Sega had done the impossible. Fight Nintendo one-on-one and win. And for those who don't believe it, forget about the numbers. Sega took on Nintendo like no one else and made it tremble. Sega and the Mega Drive were everywhere, not only in our homes, but movies, music, sporting events, you name it. The Mega Drive became a cultural phenom associated with video games not being only for kids. Video games were to be taken serious, something that Nintendo could not do. The Mega Drive showed that Nintendo was not the owner of the video game industry, but rather could be fought and defeated, and this laid path and foundations for others to come in the following generations. At the turn of the Mega Drive 30th anniversary, this is Sega's greatest legacy, opening a door that had been forever closed. showing the world an all-new range of possibilities in video games that would change the industry forever.